Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. I wanted to do a tribute to Bob Knight, Bobby Knight, Robert Montgomery. Born in Ohio, went to Ohio State, played basketball there for Fred Taylor on the national championship team, along with Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek. They were the stars. But Larry Siegfried also was a top draft choice, was a really good player, and Mel Noel was a really good player. I think Bobby Knight was the sixth man. He's obviously really smart. There's no question about that. The personality aspect, I always represent myself as a friendly introvert. Well, I don't know that Bobby Knight was a friendly introvert. He may have been a little bit of an introvert, analytical, but pretty volatile with a temper. Whether he's an extrovert or an introvert, he wasn't always friendly. I think that's tricky. He was respected and probably feared. That's one style of coaching that works for a while. It doesn't always work forever, but it does work for a while because he would have the attention of the people that went to his program. And so most of the guys go into his, especially in Indiana, where he could be recruiting. He was an Army before that, and it's hard to recruit for Army. West Point, you can find a good high school basketball player, but there's certain requirements that West Point has, and so you can't really just find good players and plug them in. He was a really good game coach. I just think when he had a command of the huddle when they were gathering. I think he had X's and O's, and a lot of people wanted to play for him. But if you got crossways with him, whether you were a player or administrator or anywhere, even in his own university, he got sideways a lot of times. So he had some hobby interactions. I remember him being at the Hawaii show, met him there. A little bit of a rough guy. I guess if you get the right topic or if you're warmly introduced with some interest in hunting and fishing or some other thing, that he just seemed to be really focused. I've got a card of him on my wall. I think it's got a sweater swatch that I got at some point, maybe in Hawaii. I'm not sure about that. Probably. And I've got some autographs of him. I wasn't scared to ask in person, but I just didn't ask in person. But he was a big, burly guy. And then toward the end of his coaching career, he was at Texas Tech and helped rejuvenate their program, got them back on track, I think partly for being a really hard-nosed defensive team. And so they've carried that through since he's not there anymore. A lot of life is the drama of like a 3-act play. We're in the third act. There's the reconciliation. So I'm really happy. I really like to see reconciliation where he was, kind of on the outs. A lot of animosity with his long-time relationship with Indiana, that the university, and it ended badly. And somebody was carrying a grudge. But the fact that there was a peace accord brokered, I think, by Mike Woodson, one of his players, and a good pro player and a successful coach in his own right, said, I'm really happy for that, because I just think somebody that's contributed that much to that university, I think, in terms of recognition, he just took them up a notch. Indiana's always been a great basketball state. So is Ohio, but Indiana, as much as any state, hoops mania in Indiana. And so for him to bring them national titles and recruit great players and get them to play well together. The other thing that's a hobby insight for this, because I'll always like to try to have a sports card insight, is that when you look at a Bobby Knight coached player or a Dean Smith, kind of Kansas and North Carolina and Indiana, there are a few programs where the program seems to be bigger than the individual. And so when you're evaluating the college statistics of a player at a big-time program like that, you almost have to project that if they were in the pros with a less restrictive coach, and Bobby Knight was pretty militaristic. He had a lot of structure there, and it was team first, then you're going to be bridled a little bit in terms of your creativity. So that, I think that's part of Michael Jordan could still have done stuff when he was in college, but I think Dean Smith, did not encourage that. It was four corners and team play and all that stuff. So yeah, when you're looking at basketball players that go to a very unselfish coached program like Indiana had, then the pro potential may be underestimated. Same thing in football. I've said, if you get a quarterback that excelled in spite of a poor offensive line and poor receivers in college, then that may be the better pro quarterback. It's a little bit of the Kurt Warner effect. That if Kurt Warner could excel in the Arena League, all the quick decisions that had to be made and getting rid of the ball, as soon as they tailored the offense for him, he became a Hall of Famer, even though these other guys that are recruited by the major programs that have the superior offensive lines were in college, and the superior receivers, they're always open and they always have time. And so, of course, they're going to complete 70 or 80% of their passes. But do that when you've only got 2 seconds to throw instead of 4 seconds, and that'll show you something. Let's see, what other cards? I think he only has 100 and some cards if I check the Beckett OPG, which is a checklist, and with some prices there too in the prices. A lot of them aren't priced because there's very short printed. I don't think the cards with 25 or less cards are generally published in the OPG database. Those 100 and some cards that he has, more than half of them are autographed. But his cards in the sets that he's in, they're almost all retrospective. One other point that comes up, because I'm starting to think about this, and that is that if there had been an Ohio State set put out in 1960 by a dry cleaners or by a car dealer, or they didn't have NIL in those days, but something like that, would that not have been just a fabulous set to see a young Bobby Knight and a young Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek and, as I said, Larry Siegfried and Mel Knoll? And then you'd have the University of Cincinnati set, which was just down the road from them, who beat them out the next couple of years and were with the Big O with Oscar Robertson. Some things like that. Jerry West is a college senior, who was in that same era. All-time greats, yet we only look at their Fleer, in most cases, rookie card or tops, and we have nothing else to look at. If we did, it'd be interesting to see what could happen there. So I just say never. Now, if somebody puts out an Ohio State set, what would it be? That would be a 65th anniversary set if they waited till 2025 and put out a Ohio State championship retrospective. That doesn't count. After the fact stuff, I think will never be as esteemed as contemporaneous card sets. The other sports card insight is if half the people hate you and half the people love you, you really can have a following in cards. If nobody cares, obviously if 100% of the people love you, or 90% love you and 10% are indifferent, that's still a recipe for big-time superstar. But if half the people passionately love you, and like I said, I've got him on my wall. I've been around him a couple of times, and both times it's not aloof. He's just in his own world a little bit until he gets in his element. And I think, do I do that? Well, I guess if you get in your own world, you're in your own world. If you're not in your own world, and if you're in a comfort zone with a bunch of people you want to spend time with and talk about, then you lighten up. So I'm sure he was like that. Again, if somebody crosses me, I'm not going to throw a chair at him or anything. I'm just going to try to figure out another way to deal with it. But you can dig up lots of dirt on him as being a volatile, angry person, and yet his results are undeniable. And I really think he was trying to mold young players, the college athletes that he had, into a better people. But at the same time, it's do as I say, not as I do for him, because his temper really got the best of him a number of times. And as we move into the present iPhone better and better camera situation, anything you do in public can be videoed and can be shared and streamed and can break out and blow up. So just don't do bad stuff. I had a close friend I played basketball with that had coached with that just thought if you were his friend, which this guy was, then you had a friend for life, that he was super loyal. And this guy was, I'm not going to say his name because he could know certain things, but he was a friend of mine too. And when he said Bobby Knight was a true friend, that meant something. On the other hand, he certainly wasn't a true friend to some of the people that he was. Back in the day, the tough love and corporal punishment was not criminal. Kids could get spanked. When I was in the 6th grade, I got strapped, sassed the teacher, and I got sent to the principal's office and bent over, and they pulled out this giant razor strap and started pelting me. What are you going to do? You can't say I quit. I'm not going to do that anymore. The bad thing is I went home and my parents, so what happened to school today? And if I had told them nothing, I would have gotten an additional punishment because they apparently had called my mom and dad. So my mom and dad know. So I said, no, I got in trouble. I did this. Okay, you get a further punishment because you told the truth. That was a good lesson for me. Tell the truth immediately. Don't start making excuses. Just own your mistakes. So anyway, rest in peace, Bobby Knight. I don't know that peace is a word that was used, except that I think he had peace when he was out fishing. I saw him somewhere up in Colorado or Montana or someplace. I was on some kind of a getaway with a bunch of guys. We were doing some kind of a thing, and he was coming back. He was at the airport coming back with all his fishing gear and stuff. I wasn't going fishing, but I was on some other kind of. At any rate, when I was young, Ohio State was one of my teams. I really don't remember watching Bobby Knight because I really was the bigger fan of Havlicek, who didn't live very far away from where we lived, and then Jerry Lucas obviously was an amazing guy as well. That's it.